Welcome, everybody, to Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. Today, we will be talking to Steven Donziger. This is an exclusive interview. He just got out of prison. He, of course, was on house arrest for about 800 days, all over a mucked-up charge of he didn't turn over his cell phone and his laptop to Chevron. And the reason why Chevron was going after him, the reason why the court system was going after him, is because he beat Chevron in a case in Ecuador where they had to pay $9.5 billion in damages to the people of Ecuador for poisoning their water and destroying the environment over there. So they really threw the book at him. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison, which is the most anybody's ever gotten for this misdemeanor crime.
No one has spent a day in prison
for
this misdemeanor
That's right.
crime.
So he was there for, I don't know how long he was there for, maybe a month, something like that.
45 days, I believe.
45 days. And then he was released. So we're going to figure out how and why he was released, what his experience was like inside, what he's going to do from here. There's just a whole bunch of stuff to get into with him, and we're honored that we're one of the first that he spoke to Marianne Williamson, I think, before, but we're one of the first that he's speaking to.
Yeah. I'm very excited to get to talk to him. I know you guys were worried about him. We were worried about him and how it was going in there. So just to see him out, to see him home, it's a long way from freedom, but it is way better than being locked in a federal prison. So can't wait to catch up with Steven. And, of course, I have to mention, it did happen the day after we did our live stream with me and Brianna and Marianne and Katie. So I'm going to claim that.
You're going to take credit for it? You guys freed Donziger yourselves?
That's right. That's right.
Sweet.
But we did have a couple of other stories we wanted to get to first. So you on your show and me on my show, we track oftentimes the apparent and obvious corruption of members of Congress trading a variety of stocks. There's actually a big report out right now done by Insider, Business Insider, whatever they want to be called now, looking at every member of Congress and their staff, and that's important too, and the stock trades they're making, the way that they're potentially either profiting off of their insider knowledge on different committees that they sit on, or might be influenced in the decisions that they're making because of their financial positioning. As a result of that massive investigation, which I recommend to all of you, or you could just watch my segment on it on Breaking Points.
Or mine.
Or Kyle's on Secular Talk.
And you're already on Secular Talk now, so pick Secular Talk.
Anyway, watch both of them. As a result of that significant investigation, Speaker Pelosi actually got asked a question about just whether or not members of Congress and their spouses should be day trading while they're sitting in these positions of power. Let's take a listen to her response.
Madam Speaker, Insider just completed a 5-month investigation finding that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior congressional staffers have violated the Stock Act, the insider trading law. I'm wondering if you have any reaction to that, and secondly, should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress?
No, I don't know to the second one. We have a responsibility to report in the stock, on the stock, but I'm not familiar with that 5-month review, but if people aren't reporting, they should be. Because this is a free market and we're a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that.
People should be able to participate in the free market economy, Kyle. Ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Party.
That's actually not totally fair because all the Republicans do it too.
100%.
Yeah, so it's not just the Democrats, it's Washington, D.C., right in front of our face.
Yeah, but these are the ones who are supposed to be, against money in politics and
They're
whatever.
not any of that, which very clearly. What the oldest trick in the book is you take flowery-sounding concepts and you put them over the most egregious possible things. Good example is the Patriot Act. You're against the Patriot Act? What are you, unpatriotic? What do you hate America? Well, what's in the Patriot Act? Well, the NSA spies on everybody and collects everybody's metadata. And we have no more Fourth Amendment protection from unreasonable search and seizure, and the Constitution is shredded.
Yeah.
That's
Be a patriot and
Act.
Support it.
Right.
What?
So this is exactly what Nancy Pelosi is doing here. She's deploying that tactic. Oh, the totally rank and brazen corruption that 182 members of Congress and their staffers were just caught in by Business Insider, red-handed, violating the 2012 Stock Act. Well, it's a free market. It's a free market. So let me get this straight. Was it a free market when Tom Price, the former head of Health and Human Services under Trump, when he directly invested in a medical device company and then pushed legislation that increased the stock price of the medical device company he just invested in. Is that a free market, or is that insider trading and corruption? What would you consider that? What would you consider it when Kelly Loeffler, Dianne Feinstein, and a bunch of other senators all sat together right before COVID in a top secret government meeting, and they said, by the way, psst, the economy is going to tank because this COVID thing is serious. The market's going downski, just a heads up. And then they all ran and mass sold stock, and it was to the tune of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Is that a free market, or is that insider trading and rampant corruption? What is that? You tell me. And look, it's just, you wonder why people feel cynical about politics, and you wonder why people are like, every election is a throw the bums out election. This is why. You're not fooling anybody with, free market. No, you are corrupt. You're supposed to be a public servant. What does that mean? I'll tell you what that means to me. What that means is, not only should you not personally be able to own stocks or your family while you're in there, also, I would publicly finance elections. This idea that these politicians go run begging hat in hand to corporations every time there's an election cycle, go to Raytheon and Honeywell and Boeing and the military-industrial complex, and go to the big financial institutions on Wall Street and big oil, big pharma, health insurance companies. You wonder why they're like, well, we can't really do anything on health insurance, and we can't do anything on healthcare, big pharma, financial regulation, taxes. Oh, would you look at that? Every provision that does anything good that the American people want is stripped out. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be because you're serving your donor base that you just raised $1 gazillion from? So there's multiple avenues of corruption that are the problem here. It's the corruption in the sense of campaign contributions, but then it's also now the personal corruption of these assholes are insider trading day in and day out, and they are going to make decisions that protect their bottom line and protect these companies. I mean, the big tech companies are a great example of this. We're having conversations about antitrust. Meanwhile, so many of these jackasses are directly invested in Facebook and all these other companies. Are they really going to vote to break up Facebook if they got $500,000 in a fucking stock portfolio with Facebook?
Well, and that was one of the things that Business Insider exposed.
Right.
Is some of the biggest, loudmouth critics of these tech companies are actually, in reality, financial investors in them and benefit financially when they, when their stock goes up in the stock market. No, it's utterly disgusting. It's insane. If you asked any normal person whether this should be allowed, they would say absolutely not. And yet, because they control the rules for themselves, it obviously makes it a gigantic barrier to be able to change. It does also kind of expose, to me, this is like a sort of perfect litmus test issue of whether or not you actually care at all about being there to be a public servant, or whether you're there for self-aggrandizement, power, and personal enrichment, is whether or not you think this should be legal. And it does separate out people who, like AOC, who's been outspoken about the fact that this should ultimately be banned and shouldn't be allowed, whatever. It does show that at least there is a different ideology there and a willingness to change some of the rules that govern members of Congress behavior. Because, listen, all of these people talk about they're so worried about the decline in trust and institutional trust and all this stuff. And then you go out and you say something like that. And
they are the reason for it. They're the reason for it.
By the way, this isn't, it's not speculative when you look at the fact Unusual Whales on Twitter has done their own analysis of the trades that are being made by members of Congress. And they're beating the market. They're beating, the top experts on Wall Street, whatever. That's not an accident. It's not because they're so brilliant and so just happen to be like savants at day trading. It's because they have inside info and they trade based on it. It's so blatantly obvious. They track members who sit on defense committees who own defense stocks. They track members who claim to be environmentalists and are invested in fossil fuel companies. They track 75 different members who stood to profit off of, whether it was pharma or PPE companies during the pandemic. And this is just completely rife and endemic throughout the whole thing. I really did appreciate that they looked at the staffers too, because it varies from office to office, but sometimes the staffers are in as much control as the members of Congress actually are. And the staffers are wildly out of step and out of date with what they're supposed to be doing already with the Stock Act. Just in their disclosures, they were terrible in terms of hiding things and not being transparent with the public about what was going on. So, yeah, for her to just dismiss this, to your point, she says it's a free market. Like, literally trading. They're cheating. They're trading on insider info. That's the opposite of like a fair playing field and a free market. That's exactly the opposite of that.
That's a good point. Look, if you want to get into public service, do your job at public service. This is not public service
Be a
at
public
all.
servant, and that may require some sacrifice. Like, is it too much to ask? All these people are rich already anyway.
Exactly. No, now I'm going to get myself in trouble, but I'm going to say, because it's a position I've held for a long time, I truly believe corruption should be up there in the same class of crimes as assault, robbery, rape, murder, because this is the shit that totally and utterly degrades a nation. It degrades trust in the nation, it raises cynicism in the nation, and it absolutely obliterates our institutions. I know that Nancy Pelosi is one of the types that likes to clutch her pearls, and our institutions are lovely institutions.
Yeah.
Yes! You are the reason nobody trusts them. You've been in office since 1872. Your husband trades on a daily basis, and every day he's making moves and just swimming in cash. There was a story not that long ago. What was it? $4 million or something? He dumped of a certain stock. This might actually be the Facebook thing.
Yeah.
So he made a killing when what happened was they learned that this antitrust thing that was being debated and proposed was totally toothless, and he had the inside information on that. So he invested in Facebook knowing that as soon as the business world learned it's totally toothless, Facebook stock would go up. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, there's a whole trend of like Redditors and TikTokers who trade
solely based off what the members of Congress do.
Based on what members of Congress are doing.
Yeah.
And that just tells
this
you.
idea of disclosure, like, oh, but we have to disclose. So now I know the specifics of how you're a totally corrupt goon. No, you need to stop being a totally corrupt goon. That's the answer. It's like when they say, we're going to disclose our campaign contributions and who we're getting. No more dark money in politics. That's the weasel words that the corporate Democrats like to use. You'll hear the most corporate of corporate Democrats say, we need to get dark money out of politics. Wait, why'd you just say the word dark? We need to get money out of politics. No, we need to get dark money out of politics. In other words, I'll tell you who's corrupting me. You're not going to do Dickie McGee's acts about it. So now you know who's corrupting me, but I'm still going to be corrupt, and you're not going to do anything. That's their mindset.
The other thing that's important about this story is the only reason she got that question, which she so rarely, all of our politicians so rarely actually get good questions, is because a mainstream outlet bothered to do this investigation. And so you can also see the way that the fact that the mainstream press so rarely covers these issues, it lets the politicians off the hook. So during the whole Build Back Better debate, there was so little discussion of the way that, you know, everyone's, oh, what's Manchin doing and what's his game and whatever. It's so obvious.
It's not ideological.
If you just look at who his donors are, and same thing with Kyrsten Sinema, just look at who her donors are, and then you'll understand what her elaborate game is in this town.
The Intercept ran an article titled Joe Manchin's Dirty Empire. He's got millions of dollars invested in all of the dirty fossil fuels, which he then sits on the climate committee, and he's the head of the freaking committee.
Yeah, that's right.
That gets to determine what gets in and out of the bill for climate.
He's a literal coal baron, and then we're going to turn around and have him write the rules on climate change. That is not an exaggeration in terms of his position of power in that committee either.
And then you have Kyrsten Sinema, who ran campaigns when she was in Congress on, I'm going to get to D.C. and lower drug prices. Then now as a senator, she took $1 million from pharma lobbyists, and all of a sudden she's against lowering drug prices. And now they're talking about a compromise of, well, maybe we'll like lower the price of 10 of them by like 2025 or some shit. Like,
amazing.
This is the problem. You guys are the problem. You guys lead to the direct erosion of trust in the system. It's institutional failure. And you can only rely on that argument of like, well, we're better than the other guys for so fucking long before everybody tells you to go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And we're at that point right now, by the way, because what's happening with Build Back Better, totally dead in the water. And everybody every single critic on the left was 100% correct. Every single one who was like, listen, here's what's going to happen. If you decouple the bills, which is exactly what they did, Joe Manchin is either going to say, let's water it down for like an 8th time and make it even worse than it already is and pass that, or it's just going to die and he's going to axe it completely. Well, what happened? Pramila, hope you feel good. All the people who ended up voting for it, hope you feel good.
Yeah, all the people who claim to care so much about our democracy and who talk a lot about the foundations and building blocks of our democracy. Banning this type of trading by members of Congress would be one of the most basic steps that you could take to help rebuild trust.
And they're not even talking about it. Nobody's even talking about it. We're the only ones talking about it.
No interest. I mean, AOC has been talking about
True.
it. There are a few, and I want to give them credit. But in terms of the leadership of the Democratic Party, Pelosi could not be more dismissive. I mean, she didn't even acknowledge that it was like an idea worth thinking about or anything.
They think it's comical. And this is what happens when she's been in Washington, D.C. so long, they don't even realize their corruption is corruption. They're like, what do you mean? This is just how the system works. Well, that's the problem, Nancy. It is corrupt, and it is how the system works, and we want to change that. And the fact that it's a laughable thought to you, oh, it's just a free market. I mean, God, these people are so insufferable. I hate them so much.